Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burring blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God.
Each morning before the air demonstrations, a mandatory pilot briefing is held. Various safety aspects, weather conditions, and pilot concerns are discussed, along with alternate landing sites, obstacles, and emergency vehicle placement. Civilian pilots are governed by Transport Canada regulations, while the military pilots fall under the Canadian Armed Forces Safety Orders for Air Display. Canada has an excellent safety record, and the safety of the thousands of spectators that come to London each year is of the utmost concern. Aircraft with speeds in excess of 300 knots are not allowed to fly any closer than 3,000 feet toward the spectators. Those with speeds less than 300 knots must not fly closer than 1,500 feet. All takeoffs, landings, hovering, and flypasts are done at least 500 feet away from, with no flying over the spectators. The maximum speed is 0.9 Mach. All parachute jumps are made clear of cloud cover and from an altitude of no less than 2,200 feet above ground level. A full show will be held if the cloud ceiling is more than 7,500 feet and there is 5 miles of visibility. A modified show if a 4,500-foot ceiling exists, and a low show if only 1,500 feet, both with a minimum of 3 miles visibility. Finally, a flat show will be held if the cloud ceiling is only 1,000 feet with 3 miles visibility. Pilots must modify their flight routines based on the type of show called for that day. There will be no air display should the ceiling be lower than 1,000 feet or the visibility is less than 3 miles. Developed by MacDonald Douglas for the United States Navy and Marine Corps, the F-18 Hornet is also in use in Canada, Australia, and Spain. Powered by 2 General Electric F404 low-bypass turbofans, the Hornet develops 10,700 pounds of thrust, or 16,000 pounds with afterburners from each engine. The Hornet's sting is its payload, up to 17,000 pounds of armament on 9 stations. The 2 wingtip stations hold the Sidewinder heat seekers, while the 2 fuselage stations house 4 Sparrow radar-guided missiles. The 5 remaining stations are for more missiles, external fuel tanks, sensor pods, and other air-to-ground weapons. This Hornet is from the 425th Tactical Fighter Squadron, CFB Bagotville, which has been equipped with CF-18 since 1985. A multiple-track, look-down, shoot-down Hughes APG-65 pulse Doppler radar is housed under the nose cone.
This is the CF-18. We bought the first one in 1983, and we got the rest of them shipped between halfway through 1983 and 84. Started training pilots on the aircraft before that, though, so that when they got into Canada, they were ready to go. Basically, all-weather interceptor. We use it in Canada for multi-role purposes, both in the air-to-ground and the air-to-air combat role. This aircraft is limited to Mach 2, okay, which is about 1,200 miles an hour. I can tell you a little bit about the cockpit itself. We have what we call a HUD, which is a heads-up display. All of our weapon systems, symbology, and our navigation systems, well, I should say attitude systems, attitude references are all through the HUD. And actually, this is the only fighter right now that when we fly in instrument conditions, our primary reference system is the HUD. When the power is up on the aircraft, there's a little display here, and it projects an image on the plane glass here, and we see through that. We can use that when we're doing air combat to focus in behind another aircraft and track them visually, both with our eyes outside the cockpit and then through the system in the symbology. Also, throughout the aircraft, we have 3 digital display indicators that we talk about here. I call them DDIs, and most people do. And they're all interchangeable. Nice thing about the Hornet is that it's very, according to the maintenance crew, they like working on it very much because you can take one part out and just replace it with another part if one's US, which is unserviceable, of course. It's a very hands-on aircraft. We call it hands-on throttles and stick. The throttles are over here to my left, and the stick, and basically we can operate all the weapon systems, the radar, just by having our hands on the stick itself and the throttle. Trigger on the nose cannon, okay? Also, we have a button here, which is what we call weapons consent switch, which is what we use to drop all air-to-ground ordnance we carry. We actually train on the CF-5. I don't know if you can see it over there, but it's a CF-5. That's the lead-in fighter that we train on prior to starting the course on the F-18. And we spend 6 months on that, and then, of course, 6 months on this, and then we go to an operational squadron where we go through a series of upgrade programs to get up to what we call element lead status, and then once you become an element lead status, you can work your way up to a section lead. Section being 4 ships or more, 4 aircraft or more. It's quite a long process, but well worth it. I don't regret a minute of it, and I absolutely love my job, and I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world.
The Boeing B-52H Stratofortress. Its 8 Pratt & Whitney TF-33 turbofans developing 17,000 pounds of thrust each. At over 159 feet in length and 41 feet high, the B-52's 185-foot wingspan requires outrigger wheels on the wingtips for additional support when full of fuel. The first Stratofortress flew in 1952, and the last, the H model, was rolled out 10 years later in 1962. Out of the 744 B-52s built, over 300 still remain in service, with more than $1 billion spent in upgrading them. Affectionately nicknamed the Buff, big, ugly, fat fellow, the B-52 can cruise at about 600 miles per hour at 50,000 feet. It can carry a variety of bombs, short-range attack missiles, and air-launched cruise missiles. A single Stratofortress can unload 18 2,000-pound bombs, or as many as 51 750-pound bombs, and was assigned to carry nuclear devices during the Cold War. A 20mm M61A1 Vulcan cannon is located in the tail turret. Boasting a crew of 6, the Buff has a range of 8,800 nautical miles and a maximum takeoff weight of 488,000 pounds. All B-52s are equipped with night vision goggles, which, when worn by the pilots, aid in low-level terrain following operations at night. They're also equipped with an electro-optical viewing system that uses forward-looking infrared and low-light level television sensors for terrain avoidance. The pilots of the Lima flight team come from all walks of life, such as an airline pilot, owner of a cement factory, marketing executive, and even a retired auto dealer. The Lima name was derived from the FAA designation for the Napier Aero Club Field, the team's home, which is LL10, hence the LL marking on the tails of the T-34 Mentors, which are painted in the original Navy colors except for the black tail band, which has become the Lima trademark. The T-34 Mentor was built by Beechcraft between 1953 and 1958 as a less expensive and easier to fly trainer than the AT-6. The United States Air Force phased out the Mentors in 1960. It wasn't until the mid-70s that the Navy followed suit. Earlier models of the Mentor were also licensed to be built in other countries, including Canada, Japan, and Argentina. About 200 Mentors are in civilian hands in the United States and are one of the most sought-after warbirds because of their economical operation and flying qualities. Now from Guelph, Ontario, is Bill Carter, flying the Pitt Special. By the way, Bill is a captain of an Airbus 320 for Canadian Airlines International and has logged well past 19,000 hours of flying time. The original Pitts was built in 1945 by Curtis Pitts. Over the years, it has undergone many modifications and enhancements to become one of the best aerobatic planes around. The Pitts was available in kit form only until 1972, when it became a factory-built aircraft. Stressed for 9 positive and 9 negative Gs, this plane can fly over 200 miles per hour. Now, from the 33rd Fighter Wing, Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, the United States Air Force's McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. The two Pratt & Whitney F101 turbofans develop 25,000 pounds of thrust each with afterburners lit, accelerating the F-15 through the speed of sound while climbing straight up. That is more than twice the horsepower of the entire starting lineup of the Indianapolis 500. All this power will send the Eagle soaring at a speed of Mach 2.5. At 64 feet long, 18 feet high, and with a wingspan of 42 feet, the F-15 is one of the larger fighters in the American arsenal. Built primarily as an air-to-air fighter, the E model is capable in the air-to-ground combat regime. The Eagle first became operational in January 1976, and the latest variant, the dual-role F-15E, coming into service in 1989. Using Lantern, for low-altitude navigation and targeting infrared for night, the F-15E model has the ability of hands-off automatic terrain following. It also has a navigational forward-looking infrared sensor for low-level night flight, as well as laser targeting and target-designated capabilities. Powered by a Pratt & Whitney R985 Junior Wasp engine, this Grumman G164A Showcat is being piloted by Gene Soucy. Gene, at the age of 20, was the youngest competitor on the 1970 U.S. aerobatic team. He has since been the U.S. National Aerobatic Champion 3 consecutive times. The wing walker is Teresa Stokes, and she has been wing walking with Gene since the fall of 1988. She is also an aerobatic pilot, as well as an accomplished aviation artist. The 9-plane formation of the 431 Air Demonstration Squadron, better known as the Snowbirds, have now performed in front of more than 73 million spectators. Each year, the team does about 70 shows, and during the 1990 season flew their 1,000th official demonstration. They first performed in July of 1971 on a year-by-year basis, and didn't become a permanent squadron until April 1st of 1978. It was in 1972 that the 2 solo aircraft were added to the formation, and in 1974 that the team changed from the all-white Tudor to the distinctive red, white, and blue paint scheme still in use today. Each year, the Snowbirds invite members of the media to take a flight of a lifetime. Before flying with the team, you must first attend a mandatory briefing. Various safety measures are discussed, along with what you can expect when flying wingtip to wingtip. After the briefing, each person is taken to their assigned aircraft and securely strapped in and instructed in various safety precautions, including how to eject the aircraft if necessary. While all this is going on, the pilots hold a pre-flight briefing to discuss the flight plan. Before long, it's taxi out to the active runway. Take off. And regroup into the 9-plane formation.
The Snowbirds have a very long history of formation aerobatics in Canada, not necessarily as the Snowbirds name. The formation team started back in the 1920s with a team called the Siskins. World War II came along, and followed by, in the late 50s, a team called the Golden Hawks, which is an F-86 Sabre team. And along with that, there were numerous other smaller teams throughout the country within the military. And the Golden Centenaires were formed in 1967 for the centennial of Canada, and they flew 100 shows. And the Snowbirds have now been in their 24th season. To become a member of the Snowbirds, you have to have the desire, number one. Not everybody in the military who flies wants to do this job, not by any means. But you certainly need some experience in jet aircraft. Our minimum qualifications to apply are 1,300 hours of flying time, 500 of which have to be recent jet experience. But like I say, that is the minimum. The average applicant has almost twice that, usually. And so to get that initial experience, you have to have done a tour on something else, either fighter aircraft is quite common. A tour as an instructor on the Tudor aircraft, or there are several other means, but eventually you end up in a position where you can apply for the team. The tour with the Snowbirds is a fixed 2-year tour, with 50% of the team changing over every year. So every year, half the pilots are in their first year, half the pilots are in their second year, and they will leave at the end of that year, the second year people. The Snowbirds last year left Canada and the U.S. for the first time. We flew 2 shows actually 3 shows in Mexico, in Guadalajara, Mexico, and that's the first time the team has ventured outside of the continental U.S. or Canada. The airplane is relatively small and slow and does not have the range necessary to cross the ocean in both directions, and so that's kind of a limiting factor right now. This Tudor here that we're standing beside is just 29 years old. It has about 8,000 hours of flying time on it. The aircraft is used for initial pilot training. If you join the military to be a pilot in Canada, you would fly this aircraft for approximately 1 year before you go on to further training on some other type of aircraft. It has one single jet engine, about 2,700 pounds of thrust, and top speed is approximately 470 miles per hour. Usually the team flies approximately 70 to 75 shows a year, spread over about approximately a 6-month period of time, from mid-April through mid-October. And the remaining 6 months we choose new team members and fly and train for the new and upcoming show season. We take a Christmas vacation off, a couple weeks there, a few days here and there, and that's about it for the whole year. It's just a busy 2 years.
Well, the London Airshow Turkeys were the ground support team for the airshow. We march all the aircraft to position, and we recover them when they land from their act. We provide them with ground support in the way of fueling, electrical start, air starts, anything the aircraft needs for ground operation. Well, the Turkeys, our little motto is we tow them, we stow them, we blow them. We tow the aircraft into position when they land, and we stow them in that spot for the weekend, and we blow them, which means we provide the high-pressure air to start the turbines of the engines when they're ready to go. When the pilot calls for the blow, we turn him on and his engine starts up. We got the name Turkeys right back at the beginning of the show 20 years ago. When you operate on the air side of an airport, you have to have a call sign for the tower, and the guy up in the tower said, "Hey, what are we going to call you, Turkeys?" And since we're a flightless bird, the name stuck.
The Antonov AN-124 Condor. This is the largest jet that went into production in the world. The AN-225 Cossack was bigger, but only a handful were built and never went into production. First flown in December of 1982, it holds 21 world records. About 20 were used in the former Soviet Air Force. The Condor boasts a wingspan of 240 feet. It is 226 feet long and stands 68 feet high. Its four Lotarev D-18T turbofans develop 51,590 static pounds of thrust each, giving the Antonov a maximum takeoff weight of almost 893,000 pounds and a range of 8,900 nautical miles. The AN-124 Condor was in London to airlift a GM locomotive from London to Ireland. This is the first time anything like this has been done. This C-130 Hercules is from the 424 Transport and Rescue Squadron, Canadian Forces Base Trenton. The Hercules first flew on August 23, 1954, and is used for search and rescue, transportation of troops, or cargo. Some variants of the Herc were outfitted with armament and used as gunships. As a troop carrier, the C-130 can accommodate 92 combat troops or 64 fully equipped paratroops. The Hercules is a rear loader and can offload paratroops and cargo while in flight. The short, stocky landing gears housed in bubbles along the fuselage allow the Herc to operate from rough dirt strips. 8 JATO bottles, 4 per side, can be mounted in the landing gear bubbles. These are solid fuel rockets that provide the Hercules with 8,000 pounds of additional thrust for about 10 seconds to aid in short takeoffs while fully loaded. The C-130's 4 Allison turboprops develop about 4,500 shaft horsepower, giving the Herc a top speed of 374 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. It can cruise at 325 miles per hour with a maximum takeoff weight of 155,000 pounds. At its maximum payload, the Hercules has a range of 2,356 miles, or about 5,200 miles with no cargo. This Hercules hosts a crew of 5, 2 pilots, a navigator, flight engineer, and loadmaster. At 100 feet long, the C-130 stands 39 feet to the top of the tail and has a wingspan of 133 feet. On a maximum effort landing, the Herc can land in about 1,000 feet of runway. Then back up by reversing the pitch of the propellers. The loadmaster gives backing instructions to the pilot from the rear loading ramp. The C-130 Hercules is the largest aircraft to be outfitted with a ski wheel combination landing gear. This allows it to fly from conventional runways or from the ice fields of the Antarctic. From the 434 Transport Squadron in Trenton, Ontario, the Airbus CC-150 Polaris. The Polaris replaces, on a 1-in-4 basis, the Boeing 707s, which have now been in service since 1970. The F-16 Falcon was built by General Dynamics to be a small, light, agile, fast fighter. At half the weight of the F-14 and a quarter the price of the F-15, the Falcon forms the backbone of the United States Air Force, with more than 1,500 in service. By 1990, worldwide deliveries of the F-16 had topped the 2,500 mark. The first flight of the F-16 Falcon was on February 2, 1974. Built by General Dynamics, this jet has the capability of Mach 2 flight and a ceiling of 50,000 feet. There are 4 variants to date. The A and C models are flown by 1 pilot, and the B and D variants have a crew of 2. The Fighting Falcon is capable in both the air-to-air and air-to-ground roles. 249 F-16s were deployed to Desert Storm and flew almost 13,500 sorties, the highest total for any aircraft in the war. The weaponry of the F-16 includes a 20mm 6-barrel cannon, sidewinders, radar-guided AIM-7 Sparrow, AIM-9 heat-seeking, and AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles. The Canadian Forces Parachute Team Skyhawks are now in their 23rd year and have performed all across Canada, the United States, and Europe. The team, based at Canadian Forces Base Edmonton, has to date performed over 3,000 shows in front of more than 60 million spectators. Once airborne in the CC-115 Buffalo, the Jumpmaster will drop weighted streamers or wind drift indicators to track winds and calculate the position of the plane prior to jumping to ensure a safe landing in the target area. In this 2-person formation called the biplane, the top jumper is called the pilot and does all the maneuvering, and the lower jumper is the pin. This formation is achieved by the pilot putting his feet into the center lines of the pin's canopy. The CH-113 Labrador was built by Boeing's Vertol division and entered into service in 1960. With a maximum weight of 21,400 pounds and a top speed of 168 miles per hour, the Labrador's service ceiling is almost 15,000 feet. The huge 50-foot rotors counter-rotate and actually intermesh. This CH-113 is from the 424 Transport and Rescue Squadron in Trenton, Ontario. The crew consists of 2 pilots, a flight engineer, and 2 search and rescue technicians. The search and rescue technicians, or SAR techs, are specialists in parachuting, scuba diving, mountain rescue techniques, and advanced rappelling and hoisting maneuvers. The Northrop F-5 first entered service in the United States in 1963 and was produced in Canada as the Freedom Fighter by Canadair under license from Northrop. Some modifications were made to the Canadian F-5s, such as the addition of a mid-air refueling probe. Also, nose gear adjustments were made to increase the angle of attack by 3 degrees to aid in takeoff with a full fuel and armament load. Its 2 J-58 afterburning turbojets give the Freedom Fighter a top speed of Mach 1.64. A fully loaded F-5 can cruise comfortably at 0.9 Mach. This Freedom Fighter is being flown by Captain Marcus Walton, who is an instructor pilot with the 419 Tactical Training Squadron at CFB Cold Lake, Alberta. Now, from McConnell Air Force Base, the Rockwell International B-1B Lancer. The first flight of the B-1 was on October 18, 1984, and it now augments and will eventually replace the B-52 bomber. At high speeds, the wings are swept to 67.5 degrees, and at lower speeds, swept forward to 15 degrees. The Lancer is the only bomber in service with the sweepable wing system. Powered by 4 General Electric F-101 turbofans, the B-1 can carry 84 500-pound bombs or 24 nuclear devices at a speed of Mach 1.8. Lightly loaded, the Lancer can take off in 2,500 feet of runway. It stands 34 feet high and is 146 feet long. With the wings swept back, the span is 78 feet, and in the forward configuration, 137 feet. Given the size of this bomber, the cockpit is fairly small, housing a crew of 4.
E-1 Lancer is a supersonic low-level bomber, capable of flying 200 feet above the ground, over 600 miles an hour. We drop conventional and nuclear bombs, all weather, any time of the day. Has a terrain following system, which when coupled up flies the aircraft pretty much all by itself. We'll continue to climb and or dive depending on the terrain we're flying over. We can dial the setting of the altitude we want, anything from about 2,000 feet down to 200 feet, all weather. Typical crew are 4, with the defensive weapon systems operator, making sure launching chaff and flares and keeping track of enemy, whether it's on the ground or in the air, and using electronic jamming and or other countermeasures. The offensive weapon systems operator is navigating the aircraft and dropping bombs. He makes sure we get where we need to on time and on target. The co-pilot is one of the other additional pilots in addition to the AC, aircraft commander, who both fly the aircraft. We swap back and forth between flying. The only difference is the co-pilot has the gear handle and the flap panel on his side of the aircraft, but the rest is all the same. I've been in the military 6 years. I started out flying T-37s and T-38s in pilot training, undergraduate pilot training in Wichita Falls, Texas at Shepherd Air Force Base. Then I went on to stay there as a T-38 instructor pilot for about 3.5 years. And then I went to training for the B-1 in Abilene, Texas at L.I.A.S Air Force Base. Flew there for 6 months, and then since then I've been at McDonald flying, and I've been flying the B-1 for about a year and 2 months. A total flying time of about 6 years, a little over 2,000 hours total time, and about 200 hours in the B-1. We took off to accomplish a mission, a training mission, before our actual flyby was for the show. We took off, went over to Michigan to do some intercepts with some F-16s out of Selfridge Air National Guard Base. And then after those intercepts, we went down to Selfridge Air National Guard Base to practice some pattern work. So for both pilots to get proficient at using emergency patterns or normal patterns and or instrument patterns. That's what we practiced. And then from there, we came back over Niagara to work out our timing before we came for our flyby for the show.